for responding to the invitation to join our second session in the decolonization journey. Many of you are joining this session after taking part in last week's opening with Stephen Augustine, and while a few of you are new. So warm welcome to all 530 of you from across Eastern Canada, from Ontario.
530.
530 people.
Yeah.
So welcome all. My name is Nicole Cameron, and I'm the Associate Executive Director at the Community Sector Council of Nova Scotia. And I'm one of the three-person hosting team for this decolonization learning journey. This initiative is made possible through a unique partnership with Unama'ki College at Cape Breton University and funding support from the province of Nova Scotia through the Departments of Communities, Culture and Heritage, as well as Labor and Advanced Education. Before we get started, Alexander, maybe you could pop up the slides. Before we get started, I just wanted to share a couple of housekeeping notes for our time together today. So due to the number of people on this webinar, all participants are joining in listen-only mode, as you may have noticed. And in addition to the questions that many of you had submitted as you registered, you can also ask questions in the control panel of the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a spot there, it says questions, and you can type your question in there. Because there are so many of us, we may not get to all of the questions, but we will do our very best. If you're having any difficulty using the question feature, you can send an email to us at info@dsc-ns.ca, and we will monitor that email. Just wanted to let you know, and many of you already know this, that after each of the webinar sessions, we'll be preparing a companion resource document. It will be uploaded here on this session. You'll see a little section called handouts in that control panel. So we have prepared a resource document from last week's session. It's full of interesting information, a bit of a summary from last week, additional resources. And we'll be doing that for each of the sessions. We'll also be putting up a recording of the webinar on the website, and you'll get a direct link to that as well within a couple of days of this session. Lastly, you will notice that there is a chat feature on the right-hand side in that control panel, and feel free to add comments in there, and we'll do our best to monitor the chat. However, we do really encourage you to try to stay as present as possible and not get too involved in side conversations in the chat. Sorry, one last piece. One of the things that you asked us in the survey last week is if we could provide something similar to a glossary of terms or terminology. So we have prepared this for you. Again, it will be uploaded into this chat room in the handout section, and it also resides on our website. So we really do encourage you to review this and become familiar with the terminology as we go through this learning journey. So in order to get started and give our guests as much time as possible, we're not really going to do a lot in terms of introductions, but I would like to call on my co-hosts, Mary Beth Doucette and Elder Jane Meter, both of whom live, work, and play in Member 2 First Nation in Unama'ki, Cape Breton. So Mary Beth, I'm going to pass it on to you. If you don't mind stopping the screen share, Alexander, that would be great.
Okay. So, well, I don't live in Member 2. I live not far from Member 2, just down the street. And so I'm happy to virtually welcome you all through the magic of the internet to Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So this territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik, the Maliseet people, first signed with the British Crown in 1726. And the treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. And so following the traditions of Mi'kma'ki, I will invite Elder Jane Meter to offer her words of welcome to us in a good way, and whoever is in the background with her, because it sounds like you might have some company there, Jane.
It's my 2-year-old granddaughter. She's munching on crackers over there and talking. Anyway, yes, my name is Jane Meter, and I live here in Unama'ki. I'm from Unama'ki. I live in number 2. And I want to offer an opening prayer. Isok miskamijina, kudumijina. Megad mi walulek, uchidulanagot. Abohan muyek, kesedla wisturiyek kiskuk. Abohan muyek, menahaj, kinamuan aktigik skijinu, akinamuan menaha. Jan eweo mego nkamulamunina. Eweo meg exaltusi. Menaha Leadotine. Edamulek, Siawit Winen. Laman, I'm sick, this will do what this net only to Mordahan. And even though I was stammering over my words, some of them, what I basically said was I asked Creator, the grandmothers and the grandfathers, to be with us today as we go through this journey of learning, and for us who are teaching to teach with a good heart and a good mind, and to teach with love, and for those of us that are all on this journey to help and to bring like a proper mind and heart to these teachings. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Mary Beth, for opening up the circle today. I wanted to take a couple of brief moments just to share a little bit more about this important initiative and what we've heard from you as participants through the registration process and through the survey results, just to help put into a bit of context. And then I'm going to turn it back to Jane and to Mary Beth, and then invite Clifford to offer his teachings today. So both acting as an individual citizen and as a part of an organization serving the community sector, I would say that the Community Sector Council of Nova Scotia and myself are in the early stages of learning to be an ally to Indigenous people. When you registered for this program, we asked you to identify your level of existing knowledge of pre-contact and early history. 85% of you identified yourself as having fair to poor knowledge. So the program we have designed is in direct response to this common level of knowledge amongst many of us who want to learn to become allies. So with that in mind, the questions that we'll be posing to Clifford and to Jane today are really coming from that point of view. I've been asked to share a little bit about what this journey towards allyship has been like for me so far as a white settler. And so just some thoughts and reflections on that. To me, the term ally means that we recognize the privilege that settler cultures have taken for granted. So we must begin our journey by educating ourselves and by opening our hearts and our minds to this beautiful way of life and living, and to the incredible hardships and atrocities Canada's Indigenous peoples have faced and continue to experience. Being an ally also implies that we challenge and work towards breaking down those barriers that continue to violate Indigenous communities. In my experience so far, I've experienced a lot, such a huge range of emotions, from shame to guilt to awe to sense of responsibility, courage, and humility. One of my own growth moments as I learned to become an ally in a culturally appropriate and empowering way that prioritizes decolonization is a feeling of being paralyzed by fear. What is under that feeling of fear is a sense of getting it wrong or making mistakes that offend the very people with whom I'm trying to become an ally with. What I've learned is that through this work, that this work is hard, and it's filled with incredible learning, and that mistakes will be made, but that what comes from this work is that we enter into, but when we enter into this work, if we enter with humility, courage, kindness, and a good degree of vulnerability, I've really been able to suspend my own sense of knowing And through the patience and grace of elders and knowledge keepers, I've been fortunate to have been taught in the moment, to be course corrected when I needed to be, and to have my own colonial ways of thinking be challenged, both with grit and with grace. This work is incredibly rewarding, and it's been my experience that when you are careful, meaning full of care and the right intention, that we will build deep, invaluable relationships with people to challenge us to be better people and better community members. It is our shared hope that this journey helps to build courage, humility, strength, and a support network toward becoming an ally and helping to create change in ourselves, in our organizations, and in our communities. So I'd like to call on Mary Beth and Elder Jane Meader to also provide their thoughts before we get started with Clifford. So Mary Beth, how about I pass it over to you?
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I know for the people that are listening, we forced Nicole, or strongly encouraged her to be uncomfortable on what I want to call live TV, on live internet webcast. And basically it's because, as far as I'm concerned anyhow, this course is not a recipe for how to do decolonization or reconciliation. But instead, our intention is to introduce just some ideas and thoughts and questions that are informed by a system of Mi'kmaq knowledge that has potentially different and unfamiliar values and principles than that of many Canadians. So not to say that our values are incompatible, but it's our job to find the common ground as well as the uncomfortable points and to be curious enough to engage in new co-learning journeys, as referred to by Elder Marshall. So as you listen today, we hope that you will reflect on some of these questions, and these are questions that I'm often reflecting on myself, is what are my core values? And what does it mean to be Canadian, as most people that are signing in are Canadian and from Nova Scotia? So what does that mean to you? And what is your relationship to the land that we call Nova Scotia, or from wherever you're calling in from? So those are the questions that are forefront in my mind. And Jane, I don't know what thoughts are in your mind right now, but do you have anything you want to share?
Not right now.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to introduce my good friend, Clifford Paul, who is the Moose Management Coordinator of Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources. Clifford is the coordinator of the Moose Management Initiative at the Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources, and his role is to engage the Mi'kmaq community in drafting a management plan for moose in the Cape Breton Highlands. Clifford is passionate about this project, and when he's not traveling around the province talking moose or talking to moose, you might find him working on his other passions, which is bearman, jewelry, and crafts. And so you can normally find him at craft shows, community events, and his favorite at the Powwow Trail. His necklaces, earrings, and bracelets are all handmade using natural stone, bone, horn, metal, crystals, wood, leather, and some precious gemstones. Clifford is a father to 5 grown children and 11 grandchildren. So Clifford, without further ado, we turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. I come from Member 2. My name is Clifford Paul. I grew up on construction sites here in Member 2. I was at a very young age. I was given the gift of a strong work ethic, and I come from the First Nation community of Member 2, and it's a community of builders, and I'm very proud of Member 2 and what it has done for me. It allowed me to have some great tools, which carries me forward into my careers that I have been part of it in life. I worked all my life since I was a little boy, and I'll probably die with my boots on because I love work so much. But yeah, I come from member two, a community of builders, a very proud and vibrant community, and very proud to be a Mi'kmaq person living in member two. But on a wider grade of things or scheme of things, I am my spiritual name is Running Grizzly Bear Man, and I come from the district or the Mi'kmaq traditional lands of Unama'ki, and that I am part of a nation, and that I live within my traditional district, but I have friends, family, where I can go to any district of the Mi'kmaq Nation and feel at home. I think that notion of nationhood is very strong, and I get to share my successes and my challenges with the work that I do as I travel throughout Mi'kmaq, the Mi'kmaq traditional territory of our people. I brought my tools with me. You can see in my cedar box here, I have my eagle feathers, and I have several of them in there. But this is the one that I will use. It was a gift to me. And I have several others that were gifts to me. They're very sacred to me. I just smudged them half hour before this webinar, so that I am able to speak my truths, I guess, with love in my heart and with open mind, and that the words will flow freely as I speak. So very, very proud of this gift of the eagle feather. And if I have time, I can tell you the story of why these eagle feathers are so important to us. And I will use this feather very much so. I do have my smudge kit. I already smudged this morning for this. And I also have my tobacco pouch, which is a gift from the RCMP. I do some work with them on the side there. I help them out with some cultural teachings, and I also help them out with as a member of their advisory committee. And I use this tobacco for my prayers, actually, when I'm out harvesting, and I will do that prayer soon as an example of how Netukulimk is not only a concept, but it governs my daily activities as I'm out there. So I'm going to start off with the definition of Netukulimk. There's many definitions actually, but UINR has one. Oh, it's right there. I don't have to read off my phone. Thank you. So Netukulimk, defined by UINR, is the use of the natural bounty provided by the Creator for the self-support and well-being of the individual and the community. Netukulimk is achieving adequate standards of community nutrition and economic well-being. There should be a comma there. We should add to this, of achieving adequate standards of community nutrition, economic well-being, and traditional knowledge, because that's very important too. And that's what we gather through Netukulimk. And we do this without jeopardizing the integrity, diversity, or productivity of our environment. That is very important. So as Mi'kmaq, we have an inherent right to access and use our resources, and we have a responsibility to use those resources in a sustainable way. The Mi'kmaq way of resource management includes a spiritual element that ties together people, plants, animals, and the environment. UINR's strength is in our ability to integrate scientific research with Mi'kmaq knowledge acquisition, utilization, and storage. So basically what you got there is a definition of Netukulimk. And Netukulimk governs my behavior as I harvest fish, if I harvest berries, if I harvest materials for my tools, you know, if I harvest like bark and all that. bark to make a moose call. These things come from nature, and they represent our relationship with nature, that nature provides, and nature will always provide for us, but will also help us survive. It's conducive to our survival, this relationship, and it's based on the concept of I can't say it's a concept, it's more of how it's described when I say at the end of my prayer, Emsit Nogama, all my relations. And it's a very interesting concept. My friend and fellow harvester, he's an elder from Buckingham. His name is Kerry Prosper. And he tells me that when we say Emsit Nogama at the end of our prayers, and that we say it means all our relations, it not only means my cousins, my uncles, my aunts, my grandkids, relatives ahead of me, relatives way behind me in the past who are still with us today. Emsit Nogama means I am made of all the parts. This eagle feather is made of all the parts of Mother Earth in our territory. And that the birds, the mammals, the trees, the insects, the fish, they are all made up of these same parts which come from our territory. That when I die, or anything dies, it goes back into the ecosystem and it supports life, and it supports something else that will come out. Maybe a tree, maybe a blade of grass, maybe a robin in her nest. You know, we're all made up of these materials, and that is our spiritual connection. Is when we say Emsit Nogama, I am talking about my brothers and my sisters in the animal world, the plant world, the insect world, the bird world, the spiritual realm, and all the realms that we exist. So when at the end of our prayer, it is completely understood that Emsit Nogama means all my relations, and that's everything that has spirit within our territory. Everything that casts a shadow has spirit. Everything that has spirit deserves respect. And if you look at everything we have in this world, we have the four sacred elements: the earth, the air, the fire, and the water. Those too cast shadows, and those deserve greatest respect. So when we go out into this world, we have to understand that every step we take is a sacred step, and that every life we take as harvesters is going to sustain life, that we do not waste it, and that we harvest with love in our hearts. So, like I said, everything we harvest is our relations, and it has respect. It deserves respect because it has spirit. So we have to tend to the spirit. So usually when I go hunting or fishing or gathering berries, or even learning from others who are very good at medicine, which I'm not, but someday I will. I hope to have many years ahead of me to do that kind of stuff, but you never know. And when I offer my tobacco, when I go out, I will recite this prayer in my mind. But for the sake of this class, I will let you know what my thoughts are as I do this prayer. So when I offer tobacco, I give thanks to the people that are with me, and I pray for them and their families. I ask that the spirit of the water, the land, the earth, I ask all these spirits to join me in my prayer and to join me in my harvest. And that I do so, I want to let the birds, the mammals, the fish, and the insects know that I do this prayer and this offering of tobacco with good intentions and love in my heart. very important. If you're going to hunt and fish and gather, do it with love in your heart and with respect. It's very important. And that I asked the ancestors to join me. I asked the Creator to allow us a safe and successful harvest. And again, I let the birds, the mammals, the fish, and the insects know that we are here with good intentions and love with her, and that we are here to harvest food, to feed our families, and to feed our friends and feed those in need. And should we not harvest food, may we harvest knowledge, because knowledge of if I didn't get a fish, if we didn't get a moose, if the berries weren't ready, the knowledge is very important and conducive to our survival. So I also harvest knowledge as well. So it's very important to offer that respect based on Netukulimk, based on Imsit Nogama, where is my sense of place in the natural world, and who am I as a harvester? What are my responsibilities as a harvester and as a community member, as Clifford Paul from Member 2, but also as running grizzly bear man who resides in Unama'ki. It's very important. I know my sense of place. I know my responsibilities, and I know that it is very important to pass on these teachings to the young people, and to I have to set the example. I can't just talk about this and do my prayers and say this and say that if I haven't done it. I have to live it and be it, so that when I pass the knowledge on to my grandkids, I have 11 of them, and it just so happens that they live close. They love home cooking, which is awesome. They love wild fish and they love wild game. They love that because I prepared a lot of meals for them that way. And for some act of God, they all have good manners. Imagine that, kids today with manners. I love that, and it's very important that not only do I teach it, that I immerse the youth, not just my kids, every other youth that joins us. We teach them those virtues. They may not understand them, but if we set the example, it sets in over time, and that we immerse them in not only in the culture, but the activity, that they live it, breathe it, taste it, smell it, and they feel it. They feel it with their hands, with all their senses, but they also feel it with their hearts, because that's very important, because we want that spiritual element to be the most important thing because of that relationship. I just have a little bit of things written there. So, as I said, Netukulimk governs my behavior. I'm not going to harvest fish when the water is really warm. I move on to something else. If I'm getting trout, I get them in cold water where the trout is really, the meat is firm and it's really at its peak nutritional value. And then as the waters in the streams and rivers and estuaries warms up, I stay away from the trout because their body softens, and I move on to striped bass. It's just like what an elder tells the young people who don't know about Mi'kmaq natural law, that there's a time and a place and a season for all your foods, all your medicines, and that you just don't hunt moose in April, May, June, July, August. You don't do that. There's only one exception, and that is if you need meat for a celebration, a cultural celebration like a powwow or a wedding or a wake type thing. Only very few exceptions. The elder told me, you want good meat, hunt it in cold weather. You want good fish, harvest it in cold water. And it's very interesting. Mi'kmaq natural law. If everybody, Mi'kmaq, non-Mi'kmaq alike, observed the Mi'kmaq way of harvesting, of treating natural resources, and using the strong notions of respect and spirituality, we would not have to have government agencies managing the resources. Unfortunately, we have to have that because not everybody is in tune with their spirit. Not everybody is in tune with the natural world. They feel good when they're out there. They feel really good and they wonder what it is. It's a spiritual connection, and it's our job, my job, to live it, breathe it, and promote it. And it's very important that this way of doing things is ancient, it's sacred, and it puts Mi'kmaq natural law into the forefront. When I do ask questions and I receive information from our harvesters, our moose harvesters and our traditional fish harvesters, they say, Clifford, it's time to bring back our Mi'kmaq laws. It's time to bring back our ways. And for those of us who don't understand them, and for those of us who don't, who need to learn them, it is challenging because of all the conflicting views and distractions away from this type of lifestyle. We have a lot of competition, I guess, against this way of knowing and this way of harvesting. So Mi'kmaq natural law is very important, and it's my job to protect Mi'kmaq natural law. And the best protection I know is through education, to teach and to always set the example. When you ask scholars about traditional knowledge, you know how important it is. You know, it's not just something that's written in a book or on a cassette tape hidden in a library. It's living, breathing, and it's a strong example in our ways, in how we do things. And that Mi'kmaq natural law, traditional knowledge, you ask scholars, what is the best way to protect that? And they would say, oh, we'll have to incorporate laws to protect and preserve these things. And that is very important to record and save it. And they are exactly right. And you ask a harvester, how do we protect traditional knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge? How do we preserve and protect that? And they will say, we have to teach the young people. We have to pass it on, protect it by keeping it alive and passing that information on. You know, I was at an event where they, in Bear River, and they re-established their ancient canoe routes using the tides, using traditional knowledge to re-establish their canoe routes in the Bear River system there. And one of their community counselors there said, you know, she said it too with tears in her eyes. She says, you know, when we redid this roots of our ancestors, the stories didn't end with them. The stories will continue with our youth. So if our youth are telling the stories, that means they're living through and experiencing those things where that transmission of the knowledge is important. I was talking about indigenous food sovereignty, what some people know as the protection of your food and resources. And a person the same age as me says, oh, I remember going on the island with my mother and we collected gooseberries at a certain time of year. We made jams. And I said, do you still do that with your kids and your grandkids? And she says, I apologize, I don't do that anymore. So I said, that story ends with you. where your kids will say, your grandkids say, my mom or my nan or my grandma, my gaju used to do this stuff. And that's what they say when they talk about our ancestors. They used to do that. They used to do this. They canoed here. They hunted here. They fished here. They set up their weir system here. And you ask them, who's they? And they go, oh, that's supposed to be us. So the stories have to continue. So I'll use my grandson as an example, and my grandkids. I take them out. I teach them. I show them the way. They provide food for their friends, their families, their neighborhoods. And I teach them to be indigenous food providers, but they have to do it with love and respect, and that the stories continue. Like my grandfathers on both sides, the Joes and the Pauls, were experts at Eland, and they had information passed down to us, and that's my job to teach them. And if I don't teach them that stuff, the stories are going to end with them. The stories have to continue. And that's what traditional knowledge is all about. It's not just something you're going to find in the library or written down in texts. They're great references, but how that information is passed on from one generation to the other. The decision making for that is, it shows that the harvester could be male, female, elder, youth, those of us who sit in between, those of us who sit closer to the elders, those of us who sit close to the youth. We make a major decision. I had my grandson, another one, harvest a striped bass, and it just so happens my co-workers were with us. They're ichthyologists, they're fishery biologists, and they're doing a study on striped bass. So we're lying on the beach with a campfire, fishing the ocean. Campfire going, the fishing rods are up. They're standing up in rod stands with baits out there, and we're watching the stars. All of us, my coworkers, the people that I fish with, my grandkids, we're lying on the beach as our fishing rods are out there, waiting for them to shake, and we're looking at the stars. We're telling stories. It's a beautiful night. The sound of the surf, the smell of the salt spray. You know, you're living it. You're not just explaining it in the book. And that catching a fish at that point is a bonus, really, because you're there to enjoy Mother Earth and all she provides. So we're lying down, telling stories, telling jokes, watching the stars, hearing the surf, enjoying the warmth of the fire too, because it gets cold at night. And then all of a sudden, my grandson, his fishing rod started shaking. So we go up, and he brings in a bass. It's about 24 inches, a nice fish, and passing on the information and the knowledge. My co-workers took a scale sample. They took a piece of the fin for DNA. They aged it. They used that information to age the fish and note on its general health. They took the measurements, and I asked my grandson, I said, you have a very important decision here, young man. And he would be 10 at the time. I said, what are you going to do with this fish? He says, I'm going to let it go back. Let it go back into the ecosystem. It's what he wanted it to do. So he released it. And there was nothing wrong with that decision, even though we're kind of drooling because beautiful fish, right? So we're going back, and we set our baits again, and we're still on that beach that same night, looking at the stars, telling stories, just enjoying each other's company as we're in this shared event, I guess, this harvesting of fish, and it's like a family thing. Even though we're not family, we're there at that moment in time doing this. So we are family because we're connected in that moment. So again, we're looking at the stars, enjoying the fire, hear the surf coming, telling jokes and stories. and my grandson's fishing rod starts shaking again. Goes there, sets the hook, and he reels in a really good bass, 31 inches, like a fat, get my hands in the picture there, a fat bass. And my coworkers take samples and they do all that, take great care of the fish. And I asked my grandson, I said, you have a decision here, young man. What are you going to do with this fish? There's no wrong decision, by the way. Whether he takes or releases, there's no wrong decision. Because he already offered tobacco, he already offered prayer, he already asked the Creator for all those blessings, and he did get those blessings. There's no wrong decisions. And he said, I asked him, what are you going to do with this fish? He says, I'm going to take this one home, and I'm going to feed my family with it. I said, that's good. I'll help you prepare it, and we'll make it so that you can cook a meal for your family, or your mom can cook it, but I'll prepare it for you. And he learned that too. That greatest love of the resource is how you handle it, how you prepare it, and how you share it. That's important. The harvest part, the kill, is one thing, and you don't want them to get addicted to the kill, and only that. You want them to understand that there's a process involved and that there is Netukulimk. The overriding principle of Netukulimk governs our behavior. But it just so happens my grandson gets a check in the mail for 20 bucks. And he goes, oh, I didn't know I was getting paid for that. I said, yeah, you get paid $10 for every sample. And every fish I caught, I just take the samples and they can get 10 bucks. But if my grandson knew that he was getting paid 10 bucks for every fish he caught, he would have fished with me all summer. But that's okay. He gets a check in the mail for 20 bucks. And his first paycheck, I guess, or first check for something with his name on it. And then I asked his mom, I said, what did Tyler do with his money? Me thinking that, oh yeah, he's going to buy fishing gear. And she told me he bought books. He bought books with his money at a book fair. And I said, that's perfect, because that's not only Netukulimk, that's two-eyed seeing. He's using traditional knowledge, and he's also getting books to build his repertoire of modern Western scientific knowledge as well, to build the repertoire of both your traditional knowledge and your modern Western scientific knowledge. So when you take the kids out, take them beyond the walls. You know the walls here? Take them beyond these walls. Take them out in the real world and let them be part of these big things, and let them have those important decisions to make. That this traditional knowledge has to be expressed, it has to be lived, and you have to live it, breathe it, eat it, taste it, all those things. Knowledge is very important, and it's for survival. And you know, I'm not a great Enigma speaker, but there's a language involved when you're harvesting that you don't get within the classroom. You don't get within everyday conversation, but you get it when you're out there in the natural world, doing the things you're supposed to be doing the things that you're responsible for doing. And by doing that, you build the repertoire of traditional knowledge, that they don't just go to school to learn it, that they live it and they pass it on. So another one of my grandkids wants to be a fishery biologist, and is watches an extensive amount of YouTube videos on all that kind of stuff. But he's also living it. He's building his repertoire of traditional knowledge. That he's going to be 10. This grandson, he's going to be 10, and he has been fishing with us for 8 of those 10 years. So he's already starting to notice patterns. He's starting to notice highs, lows, behaviors, that he's building his repertoire of traditional knowledge, which is going to help him when he is building his modern Western scientific knowledge. He is able to use the strengths and tenets of both knowledges, use them to govern his behavior, whether it be in the traditional world, in the modern world. He has two sets of toolboxes to call upon. And that is the greatest gift you can give them. It doesn't cost money. It's time, effort, and it's approaching the natural world with good intentions and love in your hearts, which is what we pray for. So you asked me, how are you going to protect traditional knowledge? The scholar in me is going to say, yes, we need laws, we need all the preservation, we need to get these old tapes and digitize them, get these old stories, record them. But the traditional part of me, in the Untitled concept, my traditional knowledge will tell me also the best way to protect and preserve traditional knowledge is to pass it on and to live it, breathe it, and be the example of it. My grandkids, my granddaughters too, they learn these skills, and they are the biggest food providers for their families because they bring home fish, they join us in our hunts, they bring home moose meat, they bring home berries, but they're also bringing that love and knowledge that comes with it, because you can't have one without the other, your spiritual attachment. So they're doing that with love in their hearts. And as Janie said, this learning way that we use open mind and open heart is very strong, and it's very important, because we have to teach that respect, and that we pass that respect on in our behavior and in the way we approach the natural world. And how am I doing for time, by the way?
Clifford, you're doing great. We have another 10 minutes or so before we start with questions. You wanted to talk about 7 generations a little bit too?
Yes.
Great.
Perfect. So we pass this information on, and our young people learn to carry these on. In a world where there is much competition with social media, technology, gaming, you know, my grandkids who love hunting, fishing, gathering, sometimes I have to drag them away from those games that they're playing, you know. And for a lot of kids, their adventures thumbs and TV screens, and they're wasting raw emotions. They're like, oh darn, throw their controller down, right? They're wasting raw emotions on stuff that you should be. Those emotions should be used in everyday life, not on your adventures, or not on what you're doing with a game or TV screen. And we have to take our kids away from that. You know, intelligence is not just limited to how good you are with technology. Intelligence is your interpretation and your sense of place within the natural world. Because how are you going to survive if all you know is click, 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 right? So when I'm out there, and I spoke of the two-eyed seeing concept a little bit, I touched on it, that I use my traditional knowledge and I blend it with my modern Western scientific knowledge as a scholar and as a traditional knowledge keeper. I have to blend those to come up with a management plan for moose and ecosystems for moose. I can't go around making decisions entirely for moose. I would be remiss in my duty as a traditional knowledge holder, because moose thrive in an ecosystem, and they share this ecosystem with other members, the birds, the mammals, the fish, the insects, the trees, everything you find in the boreal forest. And that our young people today have to understand that You just can't have a moose manager making moose decisions. You can't have a pine marten person or pine marten people making pine marten decisions. Stream restoration people making stream restoration decisions. Salmon people making salmon decisions. It goes on and on. In an ecosystem, every member of the ecosystem has a role and responsibility. So when I work to manage moose, I just don't manage moose. I have to manage an ecosystem, and that every member of this ecosystem has a role and a responsibility, and they communicate. But in today's world, is the moose manager in constant communication with the forestry people? Are the pine marten people in constant conversation with the salmon people? Are the bear people in constant conversation with the birds people? You know, there has to be a communication, because if I'm going to manage a resource, I have to maintain that level of communication as same as every member of that ecosystem. So any decision that I have come across or work with our people to come across to move forward on a decision, we have to look at how this decision is going to positively impact the next 7 generations. So we make a decision on moose and moose ecosystems. How is this work going to positively impact the next 7 generations? It's basically unheard of in industry, government, and learning institutions too as well. It's unheard of. How are we going to work for the next 7 generations? So I have to look 7 generations ahead. Also, our decisions I'm doing today, that I'm part of, that I am working for, are they positively looked at by my ancestors 7 generations back? So I stand here in this moment of time. Physically, yes, I am here in this moment of time. I could be standing on the shoreline fishing, but I'm not mindlessly standing there. I am thinking about my ancestors 7 generations behind me. And they're with me today because I asked them to join me in my prayer. 7 generations behind me, I am here. 7 generations ahead of me, I am here. What I'm doing here is witnessed by them. What are my decisions going to do to positively impact those next 7 generations? And how are they impacted by the 7 generations behind me? So when one of my grandkids decides to harvest, I ask them, what is your decision? And sometimes they release, sometimes they keep, sometimes they accept the knowledge that they've learned and let it go. Sometimes they accept the knowledge that they have learned and they keep it and they provide food. So it's very important that when the youth are out there, that they understand that how their decision to harvest, their decision to teach, and their decisions to learn are going to be positive, how they're going to impact the next 7 generations, and how the ancestors see that their legacy is carried on. Much of the work we do today, when it involves youth, it involves harvesting. I have to say, my grandfathers gave us this great information. It was passed on to my uncles, my dad, my aunts, and my family members passed some of that information on to me. And my older brother, who spent a lot of time with our grandfather in Malagawach, he learned a lot, passed that information on to us. That would be Danny. You'll see him in a lot of our posts because he is one of our strong elder advisors. Ernest Johnson, Albert Marshall, Joe Google, Carrie Prosper, all these people, the late John Prosper, who just passed away recently. All these people pass on these information, and the legacy I am carrying on is of those people. and also to Donald Marshall Jr., my cousin. He taught me a lot of things, and especially when it comes to harvesting and distribution and sharing of your food. And we pass that legacy on to our youth. And we also pass that legacy on to non-Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal youth as well. You know, Donald Marshall Jr.'s life was thrown into disarray and was shredded because of racism. And he lived. Two major things have happened because of that. We had the Marshall Inquiry, and we had the Marshall decision on fisheries, where the lives of many of our families that were positively impacted as Mi'kmaq took their rightful place in the commercial fisheries as well. And we passed on his legacy as well, because he had youth camps and he taught people traditional knowledge. Imagine going through all this, fighting for your innocence and fighting for the truth of our people in so what we got here is the legacy of Donald Marshall Jr. as well. And I had a young person fishing with me, non-Aboriginal. He's learning our ways. We have rights, and we have a landscape that we practice those rights on. He has privileges and a landscape where he practices those privileges on. So what we have in common, we're right holders, yes. They're privilege holders, yes. But we have responsibilities and a shared landscape. So this young man harvested this big eel. Oh my God, it was a big eel in the Mara River, legally within his privileges. So I asked him the question that I asked my grandkids and those that are with us. I said, you have an important decision here, young man. What are you going to do with this eel? There's no wrong decision. And he says, Clifford, I have elders in my community, which is Sydney River. He has elders too, non-Aboriginal elders that love fish. He says, I'm going to take this and give it to them as a gift. And I said, that's a good decision. You're carrying on our traditions, you're carrying on your traditions, and you're also carrying on the legacy of Donald Marshall Jr., who fought for our rights, fought for our commercial access to the fisheries through eels. So we are all connected. I'd say we're all connected by those eels, because the traditional knowledge that was passed on to me through my grandfathers was all about eels. And I learned all the other species and learned all about the hunting from my family members. And it's very important, traditional knowledge. It's not going to be lost, because we are continually offering that information and continually teaching what those strengths are. And we're very lucky. The Creator loved us so much that the Creator put us in a beautiful place, Mi'kmaq. In every traditional homeland, every traditional district has its gifts. And one thing we have in common is the best food that can be provided by Mother Nature. The Creator loved us so much that the Creator made us Mi'kmaq, living in Unama'ki, living in all our districts, and that we were able to thrive, and we were able to keep these lands and waters as pristine as possible. Even in today's world, with all our settlers here, farms, pollution, we still have a world-class ecosystem here. Just needs work. Just needs more work. It needs communication, and it needs the strong, not only science but traditional knowledge to help maintain it. Again, we have a lot of distractions in that way, but as a Mi'kmaq person, we are here to offer our knowledge, offer what we have done in history, and offer what we can. I noticed, Nicole, you spoke of allies, being allies. And I love that word ally, because it's stronger than partner. People like to partner with us and do some work, do some co-management, do some co-learning, which is perfect. But settlers in history have found out that it is stronger and more important to have the Mi'kmaq as allies in trade, as allies in warfare, as allies in surviving the harsh environment we have here, this beautiful but harsh environment. It was better relationship when it looked upon as ally. Historically, there may have been enemies, and we've dispatched our enemies very well, that we worked so hard and defended this land so well that foreign governments have to enter into treaty relationships with us, relationships of peace and friendship, that they can live and that we can live together in peace and friendship. Sometimes during the course of history, that relationship was forgotten, but we never forgot it, which is why we have so many Supreme Court decisions today in our favor because of that treaty relationship. So, ally, if you're an ally to the Mi'kmaq, that's leap years and steps ahead of being a partner. And there's nothing wrong with being a partner, but ally is where there is strength and respect.
Mary Beth, I think you're on mute.
I think I've been unmuted.
There you
Yeah,
are.
you're good now.
All right. That was awesome. And we felt like it was you were wrapping up there. I hope we didn't cut you off.
No, that's where it ended right there. Perfect.
Okay, cool. And I think we're going to invite Jane to come back on too. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. I could listen to you for hours.
Yeah.
Imagining sitting by a fire on the beach, eating
Catching fish. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So just since while we wait for Jane to come back, I have some questions that have been coming in.
Sure.
And a lot of what you were talking about, so passing the legacy on to non-Aboriginal peoples as well as Aboriginal relatives, finding the tricky balance between modern and traditional practices. Hi, Jane.
There's Janie.
So there's lots of questions that come to mind when we start talking about that. One of them is, like, what is the role of gardening in an ecosystem? I think Jane wanted to talk to this one. But what is the role of gardening in an ecosystem, and what do you think about gardening? So is it arrogance that we're deciding what is planted and what is fed and what is watered, and then how does that fit with the Netukulimk and No'gama in our backyards?
Yeah, there is, we come from a rich ecosystem, and agriculture is a very, very minute part of our acquisition for food, because we are hunter-gatherers, and we have a hunter-gatherer metabolism. We have a hunter-gatherer genome, which governs how our energy is expended by eating natural foods. We're very lucky in our territory that we had lots of food sources, and there are stories of our people transplanting sweetgrass. They take sweetgrass and transplant it certain areas, and when the rivers are at lower, I heard stories of people, of our ancestors planting corn in those areas and other things. Agriculture is important for other societies, but as a hunter-gatherer, we had a lot of food, and we had a lot of great food, and we still have lots of this great food. And it's our responsibility to, because we have such high rates of child poverty in our communities, as high as 76%. Believe it or not, Eskasoni and Membertou have the highest rates of child poverty in Cape Breton right now. Imagine that, a community thriving such as Membertou have these rates of child poverty. Yet we are so close to world-class food resources. We have moose, we have deer, we have fowl, we have fish, berries. We have to make sure these foods get to the table. And some of those is agriculture. We have families now having their own backyard hobby gardens. So in today's world, it's very important to keep the variety of food, which we don't get to acquire like we used to. And somewhere along the line, we also lost the taste for some of these foods as well. Certain tubers, certain plants. You don't see too many Mi'kmaq people harvesting geese anymore. You don't see them harvesting seals or whales. Wild bird eggs, you know, climbing the cliffs for wild bird eggs. You don't see them doing that. So agriculture today helps necessitate that variety of food abundance. Jamie, what do you think?
Well, when I talk about farming and stuff, I also look at other indigenous people, and there's a lot of other indigenous people who farmed, like
Yes,
the Haudenosaunee and the Huron and so many others, the Wampanoag. But the thing that you were talking about, and I find interesting, is that I have a friend who's from the Miramichi. She's Mi'kmaq, but her husband is not. And she comes from a Mi'kmaq. She's actually from Mariah. She's Mi'kmaq and Acadian.
Yeah.
And her husband is a farmer. And he was telling me that, he said, my father-in-law farms in a very different way. He said, I looked at history books and the places that the Acadians come from in France, they don't farm like that. And he said, the only thing I can think of is that my father-in-law, the way he farms, it's a traditional Mi'kmaq way of farming. And that's what you were saying when the water's low. He said in the springtime, they plant their crops near the water after it's been cleaned, right? And then it grows there all summer, and then in the fall they harvest it, and then in the winter those banks flood, clean all that out, put all the nutrients back, and then it's prepared and ready for the next spring.
Yeah, and that's highly sustainable, and that's the key to Netukulimk is sustainability.
But the other thing that when I think of, our people must have done some, because we have words for farming. They don't come from the French, they don't come from the English, they're our words.
Yeah.
Aren't you? We got that one, right? Yeah. And words for harvesting and how to plant and things like corn, bean, and squash. We have traditional names for all those plants. And so I think they did. But this man that was telling me about it, he said, I think the reason people don't think Mi'kmaq farmed was because there's no evidence of it. It's washed away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And an important thing is too, we also farmed our eels and other species of fish. Is that when they drained the Mercy River, they let down the dams. They sent in the archaeologists, and they found 6,000-year-old fish weirs. And what it is a set of rocks set up not naturally by our ancestors, and that they would put the eels in there. so basically put the eels in there, let them grow, and harvest them. Yeah. They be having fish farms, for God's sakes.
We have those in Unama'ki.
Yeah, and we have them.
Lewisburg.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we have those in our territories too.
Yeah, so agriculture have been part of our past and still passed on in the language. It's just that it's not practiced today.
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore because of the damages done to those river systems. But it's very interesting if we can grow a crop like that, maybe on one of the tributaries that feed into the Mara River, the Deck River, places like that, to bring back some of those old farms, I guess.
Traditional
That's
farming.
Yeah, no, and I'm thinking I heard stories about something similar, only it was oyster farms in Eskasol.
Yeah.
So that brings to mind another question then. If you had advice, like if you could give advice to Canadian governments as Mi'kmaq harvesters, what could you change, or what would you change, or what would you want to talk about with the governments to try and improve the relationship about how these things are done?
Yeah, I like that question. Dr. Jane McMillan, who happened to be the spouse of Donald Marshall Jr. at the time he was charged, she's done some great work and great research. She wrote an article for the Chronicle Herald about 8 years back, and she says Mi'kmaq should be the ones managing natural resources in Nova Scotia. And I always say, I love that article. But I also say we have capacities, we have strengths. Our friends at DNR have capacities and strengths. Our friends in learning institutions have capacities and strengths. And our friends in government have capacities and strengths. Let's share our capacities and strengths and come up with management plans for moose, for example, for forestry, agriculture, for everything that embraces and touches our lives. The government, again, should not only look at us as partners, but as allies, as said previously, and that we co-manage these areas using the best of our strengths and the best of our capacities, and we share these capacities. We can't rely on government just to manage moose with their strengths and capacities without working with our strengths and capacities, because our knowledge is very important and it's attached to these places.
Yeah, and then Jane, I also think about, so what role does that have to do with education? Because Clifford was talking about formal education and informal education, but Clifford was talking about passing knowledge down to his grandkids, and then the 7 generations principle. I mean, you're in education systems constantly trying to give advice to teachers. Is there something that they could be doing better, or that, you know, like our educational ministers and powers that be that control our classrooms, that you would want them to know?
Well, we've done some work, a lot of work actually around treaty education with the province, and I still work with them on that, and with MK, the Mi'kmaq Unama'ki. But I think it's really important. One of the things that we had an issue with treaty ed was that when they were talking about treaty education, they were looking at it from basically a cognitive view. They'd forgotten about dealing with heart, dealing with spirit, and physical. Yes, the education system, there's a lot of talk about cognition and about the physical realm, but very seldom about the emotional and spiritual. That's kind of at the very bottom. And that was one of the things that we had discussed, and we wrote a paper on it, saying that you had to bring in spirituality. You had to bring in the emotions, and you had to bring it in from that holistic perspective of Indigenous people. Because what you're doing, if you don't bring those in, what you're doing is that same thing that's being done is trying to put that square peg into a round hole. You're never going to understand it. You will never learn it if you're only learning it from here.
Exactly.
You won't know what it's about. You need to bring it, I said this last week, you need to bring that knowledge from here to here, where it sits in your spirit, where you live it, where you understand it from an emotional perspective and from a spiritual perspective. And what that does is when you start dealing with spirit, and you start speaking from the heart, and you start dealing, talking to somebody, not just as a physical human being, but somebody who's also sacred, another sacred spirit. Then you touch their hearts, you touch their spirits, and they learn more that way. And like Clifford was saying, to teach with love, to teach with humanity, to teach with caring, to teach with gratitude. And I saw a quick question here. How do we teach about spirituality? Spirituality is not a religion. One, we need to stop confusing the two. You can be religious and be spiritual, but you can be spiritual and not be religious. So it's about spirituality. When I talk about spirituality, the way I explain it is, you don't even have to believe in God. What we do, or what you can do, is believe in a power greater than yourself. And that power is love. It is greater than us. And we can accomplish so much with love. You know, when I say a prayer, it doesn't mean a big formal prayer. Sometimes a prayer is as simple as when I wake up in the morning and I think of my children that are away, and I hope that they have a good day. I send good thoughts to them, good wishes. That's a prayer. It means it's thinking outside of ourselves and maybe thinking about somebody else or something else. Anyway, but I think it is important that we teach all our children some form of spirituality, because I think one of the things with schools is we make the mistake of indoctrinating people into a religion, and then we dropped it all together. And so now the children, a lot of the children don't have a basis for anything. And we still need to bring in values into our societies. I think maybe I talked now.
No, that's great. That helps me with my answer too. It's you know, we learn within the walls, and we're taught this British schoolmaster system where the instructor has all the knowledge, and we soak up that knowledge using our memorization skills. Just one little sliver of our intelligence. We have to take our kids beyond those walls. Sure, it's good, that structure is good for the reading, the writing, and the arithmetic, but to learn things in nature, you have to use multiple intelligences. You have to use all your brain-based learning techniques. You got to use the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feels. You have to use your heart. You have to use all your senses, and that extra sense that connects your mind, body, and your heart, your spirit, and that use those to as the learning environment. So just say the grandkids and my coworkers who are looking at the stars, some night they might sit at a fire in another spot, look at the stars, and all those things are gonna, that sensory input is gonna take them to that time where they went fishing on the coast, and they're gonna remember all the voices, the stories, the smell of the fire, our voices, and that shared moment. I think when our kids make that connection, they're using all of their intelligences, because you know, when I went to school, my memorization wasn't that good, so I had to build a skeleton of what I had to write for my answers, and that skeleton gave me those bits and pieces of information so I could get a high mark on my test. Did I learn anything? No, I learned that I had good memorization skills. We have to, some kids are bad at expressing themselves writing, but I bet you they can sing the answer. I bet you they can dance the answer. And I know some of them can skate the answer, because I see them skating out there, man. They're pretty good. So why can't we use multiple forms of expression and intelligence to represent what we've learned, what we have learned? I know some kids are great artists. They can draw the answer. Some can sing the answer. For me, yeah, I was able to use some tools to help me memorize. But later on in life, I learned that learning and teaching is love, and that they should be connected with my spirit through different ways to stimulate my brain and stimulate my senses.
Great. So I have the unfortunate job of starting to wrap this conversation up because we told
Yeah.
people we'd be done by 2:30. But I mean, my last thoughts on that are we definitely have to take kids out beyond the walls, but I think we also have to work on taking some of our colleagues and friends and adult family friends,
Yeah.
workers out beyond the walls. I think we have a tendency to stay behind, especially now, behind the computer screens. And I think of Elder Albert encouraging me to think about co-learning instead of just two-eyed seeing. We want to get out, be in spaces together with people, and share learning by being together. So thank you so much. I think Nicole is, oh, there's Nicole. I had my text box over her face. So thank you so much both for sharing your thoughts. There's so many questions and so many more conversations to continue having, but it can't be in this forum today, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And now I will pass it off to Nicole to do her little bit of closing ceremony.
Not so much ceremony, but
Nicole, before you do, I know you have 7 minutes. We have 7 minutes left. Give me 1 or 2.
Way to go. Yes.
As Clifford was talking, and the importance of the outdoor education that our children need, some of the stuff, and it may taking your math book outside and doing math on grass, it means actually interacting with the land and becoming part of that land. So one of the things, many of the things that they have found with outdoor education, and studies have been done, is that it enhances concentration. It also strengthens critical thinking skills. It allows children to be more creative. You know, that's just kind of some of the stuff I can remember. But it's also very important in that in the development of the child, that we can bring those things forward to make them stronger students in school, to help make them stronger students, or even to actually be better citizens of the world. Okay, said my piece.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Thank you so much. Just thank you to Clifford, to Jane, to Mary Beth. I really loved your sentiments about being open to spirit and seeing one another and seeing ourselves as sacred, and to be willing to be open and vulnerable in our learning and in this process. So really, I have now the unfortunate part of closing with some colonial type closing things, such as we do have a survey that will be sent out. Actually, it'll be in your inbox as we close, and we really appreciate your feedback. So if you could take a couple of moments just to send that back to us. We are listening and we are adjusting and we are responding based on your comments. So thank you for taking that extra little bit of time. Don't think I really have much. Mary Beth, I believe you had some reflection questions you wanted to share with folks before we
Yeah, well, yeah, so that's just the questions that I talked about earlier before we got started, because I'm thinking about them all the time as I'm researching and like I said, talking to elders and community partners. But when we're thinking about reconciliation, I'm always wondering, well, what are the core values that we have as Mi'kmaq, as Canadians, and where do those values come from? So how are we teaching them? Who's talking to us? And then what does it mean to be Canadian and Nova Scotian, considering that, you know, almost 2/3 of the participants today that are watching are Canadian and Nova Scotian. And then what is our relationships to land, even without, you know, like adding policy and policy discussion to that? How do we use the land? What are we doing on the land? What is our relationship to land? And then how does that relate to our concepts of Canadian? So those are some pretty weighty conversations that maybe people want to reflect on them as they go out and do their daily walk or playing around with the kids in the yard or in the forest. So yeah, those are my thoughts. But that's it. I guess I'll just ask Jane what your final thoughts are, and if you have a prayer that you want to close with, it's over to you.
I can't really think of anything final other than what I said last week about how we about the creation stories and how we are the last to be created in the order of creation. And I just want to share again that what that elder told me, and she said that the reason you need to think about the creation stories, doesn't matter which ones they are, but humankind is the last to be created. And it allows us to understand how much we need nature, how much we need the animals, how much we need the fish, the fowl, the air, the water, the plants. They don't need us. They survived 1 billion years without us. And, you know, that we need to take care of that, because if we destroy ourselves, they will continue to survive. But in that, I like what Chief Seattle said, and what he said, that man did not create the web of life. We are just but another strand in that web. And what we do to nature, we do to ourselves. So I think those are really important things to think about, you know, how we interact, how we behave with nature, what are we doing to it. And I guess a prayer would be that Creator, grandmothers, grandfathers, help us to interact in good ways and with each other and with nature, to always go there with a good heart and a good mind, so that we can connect with love and understanding. Thank you. I'm Sidnogam.
Loliok, everyone, and I can't wait to see everybody next week again.
Alrighty, thank you.
Thank you all. Enjoy your day.